Good morning, church. I am Minister Pedro Diaz, and today's message is drawn from Proverbs 69, which says, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." Let me begin by saying these words could not speak a greater truth. You see, I just moved here to Tennessee from Arizona, and I have been planning that move for months. Every single plan I made seemed to twist in another direction. If I said left, right happened. If it was supposed to be A, I got B. Talking about frustration. I had timelines, expectations, and what I thought were clear ideas of how things should unfold. But one by one, those plans began to unravel. I remember thinking, Lord, what are you doing? And that's when this verse began to speak louder to my heart than my plans did. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Friends, that's life. The life of a believer, doing your best to plan the journey, but learning that God holds the compass. This verse is simple, yet it carries deep wisdom. It shows both human responsibility and divine sovereignty. We plan, that's our part, but God directs, and that is His. And it is that partnership that defines our walk of faith. Planning is not wrong, don't get me wrong. In fact, it is wise, very wise. Scripture tells us to count the cost, to be diligent, to prepare. God values wisdom and foresight. But planning becomes a problem when we forget the second half of the verse, that the Lord is the one who truly directs our steps. That means that no matter how perfect the blueprint looks, if God needs to adjust it, He will. And that's not a punishment, it is His grace in full display. We often mistake chance for chaos, but sometimes what we call chaos is just God rearranging our direction. There's a certain beauty in realizing that God's interruptions are often His invitation to trust Him more deeply, to depend on Him more fully. When I look back over these past months of planning and moving, I can see how God's hand was in every delay and redirection. He wasn't changing my destination. He was just changing my heart along the way. That's what Proverbs 69 is really about. It is not about path and steps. It is about hearts being shaped in the process of walking. God could take you from point A to point B in an instant, but He lets you walk because there's something in the walking that grows you. That makes you fulfill. Anything that you imagine. Sometimes our plans are focused on what we want to do, but God's plans are focused on who we're meant to become. That's why the heart is mentioned first. A man's heart plans his way. God works from the inside out. The condition of the heart determines how we handle the direction He gives. If the heart is proud, we resist correction. If the heart is humble, we can receive redirection with peace. When God directs, He doesn't always explain, and that's where faith lives. In the gap between understanding and obedience. Some of the most meaningful moments of our lives, will come from steps we didn't plan, but God ordered. You might be in a season right now where you can't make sense of the route you're on. It is longer than you expected, harder than you planned, and nothing looks like the map you drew. But friends, God is not lost. He's directing every step you take in faith. He's using to shape the journey ahead. Sometimes direction looks like doors opening, other times it looks like the doors are closing on you. Either way, God is still leading. We have to learn to trust the closing doors as much as the open ones, but both are signs of His direction. There's a peace that comes when we stop demanding explanations from God and start trusting His hand. When the Lord directs your steps, He's not just concerned about where you end up. He's concerned about who you are when you arrive. Our plans are about progress, but his direction is about purpose. When we finally surrender to that truth, we find the rest in the middle of understanding, in the middle of uncertainty, because the Lord doesn't just direct the next step. He already knows the destination. That means that you don't have to see the whole path to take the next faithful step. The verse doesn't say the Lord directs the plan. It says he directs the steps, one at a time, movement by movement. That's how faith is built. Not by seeing miles ahead, but by trusting God with every step, in front of you. We want the roadmap. God gives us the lamp. Your word is a lamp to my feet. The psalmist says, lamps don't light highways, they light footsteps. And that's enough, because God's direction is never late and it's never wrong. You may be frustrated right now because your plans keep getting delayed. But delay doesn't mean denial. He hasn't forgotten you. It often means that it is getting developed. God uses detours, to teach dependence, dependence on Him. When everything seems off schedule, remember that you're still right on time in God's path. There's no wasted motion when the Lord is directing your steps. Even your missteps can become ministry in his hands. He's not just a God of perfect roads. He's a God of perfect redemption. When we submit our plans to him, we're saying, Lord, even if you change my direction, I trust that it will be for my good. That's surrender. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. And that's what Proverbs is trying to teach us. Wisdom is not just knowing what to do, it is knowing who to trust. So keep planning, but plan with open hands. Make your list, but pray over them. Work diligently, but listen carefully for his prompting. Sometimes God changes our direction not to confuse us, but to position us for something greater than we could have ever imagined. When I left Arizona, I thought I was following my own path. Now I see I was following His. And that's how the Lord works, quietly, faithfully, patiently guiding, his children, even through what feels like disorder. He directs steps through discomfort to produce character. He directs steps through silence to strengthen faith. He directs steps through change to teach you dependence on him. Each of us will face moments when we must choose between insisting on our own way or trusting that God knows everything, trusting in Him completely. And when we choose to trust, we discover that the path we feared lead us closer to His presence. Sometimes obedience means walking even when the path feels uncertain. But when you walk in obedience, you're never walking alone. The same God who directs you, step by step, also walks beside you, and in the end, church, I tell you, that's what this proverb is all about. It's about the union of our planning and God's providence. It's about the dance between our preparation and His direction. It's about faith that doesn't end at planning but begins at surrender. So, yes, make your plans, be diligent, be wise, but let the Lord have the final word. Because when the Lord directs your steps, you will always end up exactly where you're meant to be. And when you look back, you'll see that every twist and turn Every frustration and delay was part of his perfect design. So church, walk around faith. Keep planning, keep moving, keep trusting. For a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And when he directs, you can be sure of this. His way is always better. His timing always perfect. And his purpose always good. That, my friends, is the truth unshaken. God bless you all.